This is an examination of the two arguments and 4 fallacies found in the article How the Honeybee Buzz Hurts Wild Bees, posted at the Sierra Club website. The first argument is that honeybees should not be connected to conversations about native pollinator conservation. The first premise for the argument is that honeybees are not going to go extinct. The second premise for the argument is that native bees are experiencing incredible losses. The third premise is that the honeybee buzz about colony collapse disorder did bring attention to native pollinators, which some politicians were not even aware existed. The fourth premise is that using the honeybee as an emblem of pollinator population declines detracts from the larger issue, as evidenced in the statement Campaigns to Save the Bees, whether they are run by international environmental organizations, cereal companies, or government entities, could feature an amazing diversity of bees instead of the pervasive and often fallacious honeybee. These 4 premises support the conclusion that honeybees should not be connected to conversations around native pollinator conservation. The second argument is that commercial beekeeping contributes to native bee population declines. The first premise of the argument is that commercial beekeepers allow their bees on public land when they're not being used for commercial crop pollination. The second premise of the argument is that wild species, which have shorter active seasons, cannot always compete with the number of honeybees in commercial hives, especially when rainfall has been low. The third premise is that commercial hives can spread diseases to wild species when they forage the same flowers. And the fourth premise is that even in the presence of honeybees, wild bees play a crucial role in agricultural systems, boosting yields and pollinating crops. These premises support the idea in the conclusion that commercial bees should be regulated like other livestock and be considered an extra active activity, so that conservationists of natural bees will be supported by the agricultural industry. The article also contains 4 fallacies through appeal to emotion, non sequitur, false dilemma, and bias sample. The first fallacy is an appeal to emotion through an appeal to fear. The photograph accompanying the article title portrays the honeybee as menacing and dangerous to wild bee populations. This is not a fallacy if the honeybee presents a direct danger to wild bee populations. However, commercial bee management is only a small contributor to native pollinator declines. By using an extreme close-up of the bee's face with the antenna spread wide, the photograph makes the bee appear aggressive as though it's charging. The second fallacy occurs as a non sequitur. In the statement, conserving honeybees to save pollinators is like conserving chickens to save the birds. Saving the birds is not correlated to wild bee population extinction, so comparing saving honeybees to saving chickens is a non sequitur because it is irrelevant to the argument. The third fallacy is a false dilemma regarding the potentials for research of wild bee populations. In the statement, it's totally the opposite when you are dealing with wild pollinators, where you have to work with real landscapes and communities. This statement makes it sound as though the lab studies are sufficient to gain insight on honeybee population and health issues, and that wild bees can only be studied in the field, making research on them more difficult. The reality is that if it is not an either-or situation, there is laboratory work being done on native bees, and honeybee populations also require field studies to help verify the evidence found in lab studies. The fourth fallacy is bias sample. A study of wild bumblebee populations along the California coast where managed honeybees are critical to pollinating almond orchards found that an increase in honeybees in particular areas was correlated with a drop in bumblebees. This study is used as evidence of a generalization that honeybees are dangerous to native bee populations. Humans have raised domestic honeybees for thousands of years, therefore a single study is insufficient to blame honeybee populations on overall pollinator population declines. Both arguments are strong despite the presence of fallacies because the fallacies do not detract from the conclusions. Better representation of native bee species in conservation campaigns will help the public understand the nature of the issue, and commercial beekeepers should be regulated like other agricultural industries to ensure natural species are not endangered.